Greetings, This is Peter Scove at Music is a Journey. Today I am doing a Canada Day special for July 1st, Canada's birthday. Surprisingly, I have not done a video like this before, even though I've had this channel going for just over 6 years now. But I've been listening to a lot of Canadian artists over the last 3 or 4 years, and especially I guess the last year or so. Well, even back in 2020 I did this whole Canadian metal quest thing. So I've really been into the Canadian music in the last few years, probably more so than before. And I got this idea last year. There was a thread going around which was 10 bands for life, and you had to pick 10 bands. If you could only listen to 10 bands for the rest of your life, what would they be? And I think 4 or 5 of them on my list were Canadian bands. And then we had the Vinyl Tag 2024 with one of the questions: if you could listen to music from only one country for the rest of your life, what would it be? And I picked Canada, which of course is a big choice to make because it means giving up on a lot of my favorite British bands, as well some of my favorite Japanese bands and other European bands, as well as Australia and other places in the world. So anyway, this list was especially difficult to make because I've been discovering so many artists, and I've been expanding my library of particular artists that I didn't listen to so much before. I have now acquired several more of their albums in some cases. So this list is in constant flux, and from when I first prepared it last year, it has changed a lot. So what I'm doing is I'm going for a top 10 of artists that I would say are probably ones that are staying with me. Whether I listen to them a lot now or I don't, they're staying with me as favorites. Then I also wanted to put an extra 3 in, which is partly because Canada has 10 provinces, but we also have 3 territories. So I thought it was fair to have 3 runners-up who just didn't fit in the top 10, but really had to be mentioned. And then, as you know, I expanded the list to 20. And so I split it so that any band in the top 10, bands or artists in the top 10, I have to have at least 5 of their albums. Or if they only have 5, I have to have all of them. And in the top 11 to 20, I have to have at least 4 albums by the different artists. So that actually made the list a lot easier to make, because there are a lot of groups where they had, I had 1, 2, 3 of their albums, and I really loved one album, and another album was really great. There was just too much elbowing, pushing, and shoving to get in there. So that's what we're doing. There are also an extra 5, 21 to 25, which are also artists that either started out in the 11 to 20 but kind of got moved out more recently, or moved in but didn't quite make it into the 11 to 20 category, if you know what I mean. And then I also thought of so many albums I wanted to mention, just individual albums, and I thought I'd just cut it down to 5. Okay, so that is a very long preamble. I hope you're still with me, but here we go, okay? So first of all, 5 albums that I just want to mention because I think they're really great. This is by a group called It's All Meat, name taken from a dog food commercial. It's from 1970. This is an album that is said to be where psychedelic rock and punk rock meet. My impression is that it's kind of like if the New York Dolls released an album in 1970. A lot of it is really raw, excellent raw rock guitar, distorted rock guitar music. My favorite track on here is Roll My Own. Also, Make Some Use of Your Friends is cool. There are a few other ones on here as well. Plus there are some tracks that borrow a little bit more from late 60s psychedelia. One track with a lot of this kind of late 60s Pink Floyd organ sound, which, but anyway, I think some of the tracks in here are so strong, and they only ever released this one album. So It's All Meat, with a self-titled album from 1970. Then, 1985, the second album by Kickaxe, Welcome to the Club. I really like the first album, especially the song Heavy Metal Shuffle. That's one of my favorite songs of the 80s. But I felt that the sonic palette expanded here more. There's more clean guitar mixed in with the heavy hard rock guitar. I think they did a little bit more with their music, and this album here has always been a favorite, even if I didn't listen to it for a long time. So Kickaxe, Welcome to the Club. One band, they really should have been in the top 25 for sure, but I don't have enough of their albums, and that is the Grapes of Wrath. I have 3, actually, yeah, I have only 3 of their albums, but there's a 4th one I want to get. And then one member left during the 90s, and they changed the name to Ginger. and released 3 albums, and I have one of those. But this album here, Now and Again, I think it's 88, 89, 1989, from the Grapes of Wrath. It's their 3rd album, and I think this is really a high point for them. A lot of acoustic tracks, some electric. They've gone from this like 80s jangle rock kind of stuff into something that is more like almost a classic rock sound, but with a little bit more of an updated feel to it. So I really like this album. A lot of melody on here, lots of good vocal melodies. We've got 2 singers doing vocal harmonies in places, acoustic guitar, some strings, tubular bells, whatever. It's cool. I like this album. Then one of the pop-punk bands that I quite like. This is Treble Charger. I have 3 of their albums. The one before this one, it's alright, it's pretty good, but I think this one here, Wide Awake Bored, just has so many tracks that I really like. I'd say probably 5 or 6 of the tracks on here I really like. American Psycho is the one that you might know. It was probably the most popular track off this album, but just a really good, solid pop-punk album. Again, 2 lead vocalists, so we get some good harmonies, we get, you know, different vocal styles for different songs. Some more clean guitar pretty ones, some more straight up banger pop punk songs. So I really like this album. The album after this is also pretty good too, but this is a favorite of mine. And for one more album to mention in my 5 individual album picks, this is an album by a group called Chthe'ilist. It's called Le Dernier Crépuscule, the final twilight or the last twilight. This is a death metal band. It is a kind of a super group with people from different bands coming together to make this group, recording this one album only, as well as a single with a B-side. This is an album that is heavily inspired by Demilich, a Finnish death metal band who only ever released 1 album, and it is legendary. There's a lot of Demilich influence on here, but they do add some of their own ideas, and I really like this album. So that is the 5 individual albums I wanted to mention. Next up, we've got 5 bands who are kind of floating around in that, you know, they were in the top 20 and then they kind of moved out again. And but all of these are strong albums worth mentioning. So this is Cauldron, a new wave of traditional metal band from Ontario. This is their 2018 album, New Gods. Yes, that is a marine gastropod on the cover. I don't know why they chose that. I remember one guy saying it looks like something Jabba the Hutt flicked out of his nose. But this is a really cool album. I like all of Cauldron's stuff, but this album is just head and shoulders above the rest in my opinion. If you like mid-80s Dokken, that is always the one that reminds me of them the most. You've got the kind of hard rock, melodic hard rock guitar, but also really strong melodies, great playing, great songs. Cauldron, The New Gods. Striker, a band that in and out, I really like them. Sometimes I'm really into them and I just love so much of their stuff, and other times it's just a few songs I feel like listening to. But their 2018 album, Play to Win, won the Juno Award in 2020. I think this is the best one, and it's a really nice cross between the more melodic, heavier, hard, kind of 80s throwback metal type of thing, retro metal type of thing, as well as some more melodic pieces that are a bit more like this more melodic, I don't want to say hair metal or glam metal, but kind of along those lines. So this album, I think, is still my favorite of theirs. New album came out just this year, actually. It's pretty good, but I like that one better. Danko Jones, I just started listening to Danko Jones this year. I've got 5 of his albums. Each album has 1 song that I think is just killer, and then 2 or 3 other songs that I think are really great, and then the rest of the songs is just all pretty much the same, straight up 3/4 chord hard rock, very much kind of like AC/DC, just with a different feel, because Danko Jones, I really like his vocal style. He's got a kind of a soulful feel to it, but tough, street, soulful feel with just a bit of humor in there. So I really like it. This is his Fire Music album I'm showing just because I like the cover, and one of my favorite songs, Getting Into Drugs, is funny and it's a great song. So Danko Jones is in there. He probably would have ranked higher. It's just after 5 albums that are all pretty much the same style of music, and that's what he does. Every album he follows a similar style, so don't expect much else, but it's all good if you like it. Sum 41, I've got a few of their albums. I like all of them. I really like some songs off all of them, but they're all killer, no filler album for me. This is just a highlight in pop punk music. If you see the videos, there's one from this album, one video where they are doing zany dives off a diving board into a pool. In another video, they're driving around squirting people with these massive pumping squirt guns. That's what this album feels like. It is just fun, wild times in the summer, being crazy, and enjoying spraying water, jumping in water, whatever. It just has that fun feel to it. Lots of really good melodies again, lots of powerful music, just a great album. I think they've never beat it, although I don't have all of their albums, and their final album was just released earlier this year. I'll have to pick that up a little bit later on. And then I've got to mention Saga. I am not like a tremendously huge Saga fan, but I have 12 or 13 albums, and all of them always have songs where I think the music is really amazing. They've got a hard rock aspect, a progressive rock aspect, and a pop rock aspect. And it's the pop one that makes it a little bit weak for me at times. There's great music. Michael Sadler's voice is fine, but just occasionally it gets into this little bit of a pop quadrant, which always pulls me back off of it again. Not always, but sometimes. So I still think Saga are definitely worthy of mention, though. A band running since the late 70s. I don't know what they're doing now, but they did have an album some years back. Anyway, so they've got to be mentioned in there. All right, so that is the 25 to 21. Let's move on now to 20 to 11. I have to mention Sacrifice, one of the big four in Canadian thrash of the 80s. One of them is in my top 3. So we'll just talk about Sacrifice. I could also have mentioned Razor, but at the moment I still only have 2 of their albums. Have my eyes on a couple more, but that's why they couldn't be on the list. Sacrifice have 5 albums out. I have all of them. New one is due out later this year, I've heard, so I'm looking forward to that. Just great thrash metal. Yeah, what thrash metal is. Canadian style, I guess. So Sacrifice, this is their second album, Forward Determination. The first album was a little bit more on the darker side, kind of an Evil Dead, slightly first wave black metal, slightly death metal type feel to it. This is getting closer to more straight up thrash. They did get a little bit more into the technical thrash metal as well. Gotta mention Kitty. I had one album by Kitty I bought some years ago, didn't really get into them, and now just this year I've really become interested in this band. Gotta say, I'm more interested in them for the stories, the characters, the people in the band, the stories of the band, what they've been through, what they've done, what they've achieved. I really like that, but I do like their music, of course. The new album was supposed to have been released June 21st. I got notice from Amazon there's been a delay on shipping it, so I don't know when I'm going to get it. It's their first album in 11 years as well, 11 or 12 years. So anyway, Kitty, the Morgan sisters, the Lander sisters, Morgan Lander and Mercedes Lander, plus other people in the band. I like this band anyway. Morgan has got to be one of the best female harsh vocal singers out there. Matthew Good Band, as well as Matthew Good, the solo artist, both have great songs. I do like the Matthew Good Band and the early Matthew Good solo albums more. I find Matthew Good's later albums that I've heard just have more of a samey feel to them, which is often the case with a lot of bands. They go through their kind of finding their sound phase, and then they drift off somewhere, and then they go back to their sound, and then they just kind of flatline and keep the same. But back here, this is the second full-length Matthew Good album called Underdogs. I think it's from 97. The song Apparitions was the big hit off here, but very cool alternative rock album with very interesting songwriting and just some really cool sounds. Northern Pikes. Snow in June is the album I probably would have shown as my favorite, but Secrets of the Alibi was sitting around because it hasn't been filed away yet, and this was sent to me by Nick over at During the Meanwhilest Photography channel and Careful with That Axe Eugene Music channel. So that's Nick. Thanks to him, I've got this one here. There's a story about that in a previous video. Northern Pikes, Saskatchewan band, melodic, very nice rock music, like the Beatles kind of cleaned up a little bit. Like, just if you had a 12-year-old daughter who was getting into rock a little bit, you know, this might be the band you could take her to see. 3 lead vocalists on here, just they really know what they're doing, and I think they're still active. They had another album out not that long ago. Yeah, cool band. Blue Rodeo, a band I was kind of into just recently this year. I've been picking up more of their albums. This is their third one, Casino. This is an alternative country band. I like their earlier albums where they have a variety of stuff, including almost like a garage feel to some songs, touch of psychedelic feel and experimental in some other songs, straight up rock songs, countryfied songs, country ballads. It's just quite a variety in their older albums. I think, again, in their later albums, they have a more consistent sound, which doesn't appeal to me as much. This album here and the two before and some of the ones after, you don't know what the next song is going to sound like. You don't know which way they're going to go. So Blue Rodeo. All right, how are we doing here? We're getting into this. This is Spell Opulent Decay, a band from Vancouver. Started out as a traditional metal band, that kind of retro feel to it. By Opulent Decay, I felt they really started moving their music in a new direction, and I was very excited to hear where they would go after that. The album after this, the more recent one, Tragic Magic, it's good, but I don't like it as much, which is why Spell didn't make it into the 11, 12, 13 position as well. They have only 4 albums out, have all of them. They did get a new guitarist, and we'll hopefully hear what he contributes to the band on the album after, whenever that's coming out. So Spell getting in there for that. Gotta mention Triumph. I was really into Triumph at one point back in the 80s, and they've remained a favorite even if I don't listen to them all that much these days. I have most of their studio albums. This was the very first one I ever got, Thunder 7. Just one of Canada's classic hard rock bands, a little bit on the heavy metal side, little bit on the progressive side, but just a really cool band. Rick Emmett, one of the best guitar players around, certainly for the time anyway. Still, he's got to be really, really great. So Triumph have got to get mentioned. And one other band, no, we're into the top 13. So this in 13th place is Cryptopsy. So I like a fair variety of rock and metal music, but I do have a soft spot for the extreme metal styles, and Cryptopsy is in that brutal technical death metal style, and I really like it. I'm showing their album None So Vile here, which is their favorite album amongst the fans, the highest rated album. The vocalist on here, going by the name of, I think his name is Dan Greening, but goes by the name of Lord Worm. I don't like him as much as the current singer, Matt McGachy, who's been on the last albums since 2000, actually since around 2006 or so. But I know most Cryptopsy fans prefer the Lord Worm albums. So I'm showing None So Vile on here, which is really a great album if you like really brutal, technical death metal. Flo, what's his name? Flo Mounier, the drummer. Anyway, Flo is an amazing high-speed drummer. Excellent stuff. La Chinga, their 4th album, Primal Forces, just came out last year. This is just a straight-up hail to the 70s hard rock band trio. Just excellent. All 4 of their albums are really excellent. Like 70s hard rock, just updated with a more grittier hard rockin' sound, better, more modern production style, and yeah, great band. I really like the song Killer Wizard from the 3rd album. I did a video talking about La Chinga too, I believe, or at least they were in part of the video. So La Chinga from Vancouver. And, ooh, the latest newcomer to muscle their way up the list and almost break the top 10, this is 5440. And this album, Dear Dear, I think it's their 5th album, and where they changed their style once again, this time to go into the 90s with a more alternative rock, slightly grungy style. This album and the next 4 or 5 after, no, this album and everything they did after, up until the most recent one, are all really, really good. And quite consistent in their sound, but still quite a bit of variety. Like, you never feel like you heard the same song again after listening to the previous song. So always something different coming up, but still within the same kind of spectrum for 5440. I think their more recent albums have introduced more softer songs, more melodies, more prettier things, and their older ones from the 80s is more of the in the kind of like indie rock and jangle pop rock and yeah, something like that. But I've really been enjoying 5440's music recently. Now I have 6 or 7 albums. I've got 3 or 4 more coming. And this one here I got thanks to Alex at Beer and Vinyl for choosing me as the winner of his contest and giving me some Amazon money to play with. Well, I have been trying to keep my videos a little bit shorter these days, but I just see now that we're well over the 18-minute mark. So let's get into my top 10 Canadian artists and bands. Had to include Devin Townsend, of course. Now, I was really into Devin Townsend stuff back around 2015, 16, maybe even 17, and I had to get everything I could from Strapping Young Lad, Devin Townsend Band, Devin Townsend Project, Casualties of Cool. I had to get all that stuff. The only stuff I didn't get was what was not available on CD at the time. That includes Punky Brewster, his Grey Skies recordings that he released through iTunes as well. There was some ambient stuff called Hummer, 1 or 2 albums there. Since then there's been some more material that's been released. I don't know about so much. I don't have his last 2 albums just because I kind of got Devin Townsend out after a while. I think one of the things that is kind of holding me back from getting back into him again is the production style is this kind of wall of sound feel where I don't particularly get into that style of production because for me, music is very visual and I like music that is recorded where I feel like I can move between the instruments and feel the sound of each instrument. And his style, it's more like a plaster casting of instruments where you can touch them but you can't move around them. That's my impression of listening to the music. But it's true that every album has songs that I like, and there are still some that if I pop them in and listen to them, I really enjoy them. So I'm showing Devin Townsend's 3rd album as a Devin Townsend under the name of Devin Townsend. Is it the 3rd? Or it's the 4th. It's the 4th album. This is called Teria, which is one of his most famous ones. Alright, no list would be complete in my collection without mentioning April Wine, because, you know, I did a couple of videos about them before. I did like the first 10 albums thing. I think I also did April Wine ranking video. So yeah, gotta mention April Wine. I'm just holding up The Nature of the Beast here because this is one of their most famous albums with All Over Town, Sign of the Gypsy Queen, Just Between You and Me, some of their biggest songs. But really almost any April Wine album is worth listening to in my book. Interestingly, when I think of April Wine, I think of a kind of average rock band. That's just kind of like my impression. But when I listen to the albums, I feel they've got some really strong songs on every album. And that includes even the debut. So April Wine. And then this lady really caught me by surprise, Lee Aaron. So I got into her last fall. And I have now almost all of her studio albums. The 80s ones, there are songs I like, a couple of songs I really, really like, but based on the strength of those 80s albums, she wouldn't have made it in even to the top 25. However, it is her last 4 albums. Okay, so she's done 4 albums of original studio material since 2016. She also did a Christmas album and just this year released a covers album, which I haven't got yet, and I'm kind of not in a rush to get it. Not a big fan of covers albums. But those 4 studio albums are really, really great. This one here, Fire and Gasoline, I think this is the 2016. So this is when, after a 10-year break from recording and releasing albums, she got back into gear, teamed up with Sean Kelly, who had previously played in Helix, excellent guitarist, and put together a band, and they've been going together since then. Great those 4 albums are. And also I picked up her 90s stuff, Lee Aaron in the solo album in the 90s with the band Too Precious, liked a lot of the songs on those 2, and as well her album Beautiful Things was really my favorite pick of albums I bought at the end of last year, and an album I think that is just a solid winner all the way through. So Lee Aaron, congratulations. you made it into my top 10 quite suddenly from last October. Blood Ceremony, 5 albums out now, so they get to make it, and they're great. They're starting out as a heavy stoner rock, or, you know, that kind of sound, but with organ and flute and female vocals, and all those 3 go to the same person, Alia O'Brien, doing lead vocals, playing flute, playing keyboards. Their sound evolved, getting into a little more heavier at first, then getting into more less heavy, but more of this late 60s, early 70s witch rock, slightly progressive feel to it. And each of their albums, I think, have just been really great. This one here, their third one from, I think, 2016 or so, The Eldritch Dark. Great, great album. And the one from just last summer, The Old Ways Remain, is also a terrific, terrific album. Also, Unleash the Archers, a band whose last 2-3 albums have been really fantastic. This is this year's release, Phantoma, from May 10th. I did a review on this album as well. I did a video talking about the history of Unleash the Archers and their releases. The one before this, Abyss, I thought was just an amazing album, and it won a Juno Award in 2021 for Best Heavy Metal Album. Also, the album before that, Apex, is considered by many to be an excellent, excellent heavy metal album. Certainly one of their best songs ever is on that. And the albums prior to that, they started out more as a melodic death metal band with gruff male vocals and clean female vocals, but progressed onwards into more of a power metal, traditional metal band with mostly female vocals. And Brittany Slays is just a fantastic lead singer. So more of a power metal band and traditional metal band by now. Some throwbacks to the 80s. Just excellent, excellent group. They just wrapped up their tour in Australia and New Zealand, and the comments from fans on their Facebook page. What a fantastic band, and really, really nice people too. So now we're into the top 5. Here is Spirit of the West. This is Two-Headed, which, I don't know what album this was, their 7th or 8th album. It's not talked about as much. Most people talk about Save This House or Faith Lift. They had 4 albums where there was a 4-piece band and then a 5-piece band. And on those 4 albums included Linda McRae, whom I talked about not that long ago, doing bass, accordion, and backing vocals. And I really like those 4 albums the best. So this one, they started out, let's see, as a 3-piece Celtic folk band, gradually moving into an alternative folk rock fusion band, and here much less of the folk element and more of the alternative rock element, but some bit of flute and accordion in places. So really cool band, one of my favorites, and whether I listen to them a lot recently or not doesn't matter. They just stay in my, one of the top positions. Along with that, we got to say that for the Tea Party, I did a video about them a couple of years back talking about their entire discography. This is their 3rd full-length album and 2nd major label album, The Edges of Twilight, a band who started out with a heavy Led Zeppelin influence, moved more into a hard rock, folk, and Eastern influence band, gradually expanding on the Eastern sound, moving then into industrial, and then just trying to combine everything into various cool tracks, finally getting away from the industrial, getting heavier, and then a split up, and then coming back together, and they've done 2 albums since their regrouping in 2011. But just a really cool band, very intelligent lyrics, very skillful musicians playing all sorts of instruments. So the Tea Party. And now the top 3. These could really be, the one I'm going to mention, number 1, could also be number 2. And the one I'm going to mention is number 3, could be number 1. So here it is. This is Sloan, Between the Bridges. Sloan is one of my all-time favorite bands ever since I first heard them back in late 92 or early 93. A band that changed their sound a lot, tried to do lots of different things, and a band that still puts out really great albums. 4-piece band, it's been the same 4 members ever since, but from 2006 they added a 5th member who at first was a touring member, later on started appearing in the studios as well, and finally has contributed a bit of writing to the music. But basically the same 4 dudes. This is their 1999 album, Between the Bridges, their 5th album, which remains one of my favorites. It is not a fan favorite. There are 3 or 4 albums that usually rank higher than this. But I really, really love this one. This one has a great retro 70s sound, really well produced, great sounds on the guitars, the piano, and all 4 members singing. Really, really cool. All right, I hinted at this a little while ago. Voivod, one of Canada's top 4 of the whole 80s thrash metal scene. And you know, if you've seen that I've done like a 3-part video series on the history of Voivod, as well as a walk through the discography of Voivod. So this is their 4th album, Dimension Hatros, with the classic lineup of the 80s. This is usually ranked as their best or second best album amongst fans. And it is probably in the top 5 for me. I have a couple of other ones I like more, but this is probably the album I should show for Voivod. So a band that is still going on strong now, still 2 of the original members in the band, and the 2 replacement members, the 2 members now who are taking over for the 2 who are not there anymore, grew up listening to the band and learning to play their respective instruments, inspired by the band. So the band is keeping up with their sound. Okay, and I haven't mentioned Rush yet, right? So here they are. Coming in at the number 1 spot, but like I said, could have switched places with Sloan easily. Here's Rush 2112. I don't think I need to say a lot about Rush. There was a period where I listened to almost nothing but Rush for about 6 months. I kind of got rushed out, but there are still certain songs off most of the albums I am happy to hear anytime I feel like popping it on, and yeah, they remain as one of my favorite all-time bands, as well as favorite Canadian bands. So that is it. That was probably a long video. If you stuck through the whole thing, thanks a lot. Tragically Hip, mysteriously not here, but it's because I never really got into the band until this year. I bought 2 of their albums and I thought they were actually really good, and I'm going to be checking out the discography some more. Also, no Bare Naked Ladies, but I actually do have 5 albums of theirs, and I do like them. So yeah, so many more albums, so many more bands I could mention, tons and tons. But anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching all the way through. The rest of this month, most of the videos are also going to be CanCon videos, that is Canadian content focused, so hope you don't mind. But anyway, that's it for today, everyone. Happy Canada Day to all the folks in Canada, and see you in the next video. Bye.